Ladies and gentlemen, our very first panel discussion. And first up, if I could please invite Ms. Noopur Chaturvedi, CEO, NPCI Bharat Billpay Ltd, to please come on stage. May I further invite Mr. Ranjeet Jaiswal, Senior Vice President and Business Head in Solutions Global Limited. Mr. Pranay Jhaveri, Managing Director, India and South Asia with Euronet Worldwide. We're still just putting the mics out there, but meanwhile, let me also please invite Mr. Sheik Mohideen, Senior Vice President, Worldline. And to spearhead the panel discussion, we have with us Mr. Mohit Gopal, Chief Operating Officer, PayU Payments Private Limited. Thank you so much to all of our speakers for joining in. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to request you all to please take your seats, and let me quickly hand over the proceedings to Mr. Mohit Gopal. Over to you then.
Because this is the first time I'm actually moderating a session, and I'm also super excited because the talent we have on the stage here, and I'll include myself in that list, is simply breathtaking. We have Noopur, who's of course a former colleague. She is CEO of NBBL, which is taking India forward. We've got Ranjeet. Ranjeet comes in from Worldline, one of the world's largest payment companies. And in India, they've done great work for a long, long time. Oh, ISG, sorry. I knew I was going to make a mistake out there, and I did it. We have Pranay, who's, of course, been MD and head India and South Asia for Euronet. And more importantly, he's also a leading light for PCI. And, of course, we've got Sheik Mohideen, who is from Worldline. I got it right, 50% chance of getting that right? And I'm, of course, Mohit, your friendly neighborhood moderator. And with that, we can get started. So what we'll try to do is we'll try to keep this on time, give a lot of time for your questions. Hopefully, I'll ask all the tough questions here so that you won't need to do that. But still, we'll keep it in that format, right? So let's get started. All set? Great. Noopur, we'll start with you. And I just want all of us here to just understand a few things about bill payments. If you'd just like to give us a quick run over of what exactly BBPS is and where you're coming from.
Okay, thanks, Mohit. Thanks for asking that question. Always good to revise history, though I've been a science student. In India, the bill payment journey has actually been split into three. And let me talk about these three journeys in separate points. One is, and I don't know how many of you would recall, is our parents or our grandparents actually going to a bank branch, withdrawing cash, and then heading out to pay a bill, be it for their landlines at that point of time, or whether it was for the electricity at the payment collection points. The second part happened when a lot of payment aggregators came in and brought on board these utility players. At that point of time, the banks were expected to have multiple integrations with different players having different set of merchants. So they would have one connection with a bill junction, another one with bill desk, and a third one with NPBL, so on and so forth, right? This was prior to BBPS. Now, what BBPS has done and brought together is the entire ecosystem at a single platform. So on one side is the demand side, which is all of us who now very easily use PhonePe and Paytms to make our bill payments. We can use physical agent channels. We can use our bank channels as well. On the other side is the supply side, which has utility companies, DTH companies, postpaid companies, now even insurance companies and lending companies who say that I need to collect from the customer. They put in their invoices through our partners onto BBPS so that the consumer has immense choice on where he wants to pay from, right? So these have been the three phases. As we move forward, of course, the scope is immense, and we will be talking about it during the course of the discussion. But I just wanted to give you that flavor of what we do as a national infrastructure, as a national platform, enabling all the consumers to be able to pay any bill across the country from the channel of your choice. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that, Noopur. Pranay, moving over to you, both in your role as heading Euronet, which has been one of the leaders in bill payments, but also in your role in your PCI chair, in your PCI head role, right? where do you see this evolution? How has it been, this journey so far?
Well, it has been a phenomenal journey. We only talk about the growth of UPI, and obviously you can't compare these two, but BBPS has also had a phenomenal run. I mean, just look at the numbers over the last 5, 6 years. Since the time BBPS was launched, you have 66 OUs, operating units, right? On the customer OU side, you have 35 OUs on the biller side. You have 20,000 plus billers. January, I think we clocked more than 100 million transactions a month, right? And obviously, we celebrated that. I think the March number was 111 million transactions. And the headroom for growth, I believe, is phenomenal. RBI recently extended the scope of BBPS to all payments, right, and collections, including non-recurring ones. RBI has also allowed BBPS to go cross-border by allowing NRIs to make bill payments on behalf of their families, right? So some of these interventions, I mean, imagine collections is such a big space, right? Especially if you look at a diverse country like ours, you have small businesses, you have MSMEs, right? They have no wherewithal, no tech, no resources. So if NBBL can emerge as for example, a national collection system, I think the headroom that we have for growth is immense. So we are very, very proud to be a part of BBPS, and we look forward to the continued growth.
Now, thanks so much for that. We'll come to that confusion between NPCI and NBBL later. But for now, my question to you, Ranjeet. Similar to the way Noopur actually explained to us what BBPS is all about, if you can just tell us a bit about the payment aggregation space or payment gateway space, please.
Thanks, Mohit. Good morning, everyone. So as RBI defines it, PA or payment aggregator is an entity which enables a merchant to accept payment instruments from their customers to complete their payment obligation online without the need to have set up a specific payment integration system of their own. This also enables the merchants to be able to directly connect with the acquirer. So all the obligation of collecting the payment, pooling it, and then eventually transferring it to the merchant rests with the PA. So in common parlance, it's actually the bridge between a merchant and a consumer in terms of the online payment. And this has been a very competitive space over the last decade. Before the regulation kicked in, there were a lot of players who were into this space. There are certain players who are still vying to look into this space. The entry barriers are quite low, and it is an extremely cost-sensitive space, and therefore this gives the chance for all the players who are there in this particular ecosystem to innovate and find their own differentiators to be able to lure more number of customers. There are some 3 or 4 million customers, merchants in this particular eco space. I don't know, there is no specific data which is available as far as how many number of merchants are there, but again, very few large number of PAs who've taken 60-70% of the market. However, a new set of breed which is coming in, which is again based on their innovation, that they are now acquiring larger number of markets. 3 years back, RBI came up with a regulation to regulate this particular ecosystem as well. Approximately 50 odd people have been issued in principal licenses as of last February. I think few of them came on later on as well. 32 of them have been existing players in the market. So most of them at least 5 years, if not more, in this particular space. As we go ahead, I think this space is going to really find its own way. RBI is doing whatever it needs to do to be able to regulate this. But in terms of getting newer technology in, the newer space in terms of finding how to give the benefit to the merchant to be able to accept online payments as seamlessly as possible, and therefore then passing it on to the customer, I think this is how the system, this place is looking at.
No, thanks so much for that. Sheik, moving on to you, how do you see this space evolving, the payment aggregation space? And if you can just shed some light on regulation, as you just spoke about that?
Thanks, Mohit. Sure. So regulation is a difficult question to answer here. And keeping Noopur with me here, I don't think I'll be able to speak the truth, but still I'll try to do that. So regulators play a major role in this India stack growth story, right? And they're doing a great job. In fact, Mr. Dilip's as-based number of 1 billion transactions per day and the other milestones that we are able to achieve is all primarily because of the strongest regulator who's there at the back of our whole process. So that's one major role that regulators play. And the other countries who are trying to replicate the India stack story, they should also try and replicate the regulatory framework that we have, because that's one of the key pillars for us. And only because of that, we've been able to grow in the past years, all right? And coming to regulation, there is an upside as well as the downside, right? Upside, what I see is it kind of gives a level playing field for all of the players here in the country, right? That's the upside because of the regulation that we get. And the downside, any regulation, not just in digital payments, any industry, if regulation plays a major role, then it kind of limits the innovation that happens in that industry, right? So having said that, we as fintechs and paytechs, it is our responsibility to keep innovating in spite of all the good work that regulation is doing. That's
Well, thanks so much for that. I think now with that, we're finished with the first part of today's episode, which was just getting introductions and a bit of the framework out of the way. And now, of course, the kid gloves come off. Noopur, a question for you, and I'm sure you've been asked this in the past, but do you feel that there's a conflict of interest in the role which NPCI and NBBL play? NPCI as a regulator and a not-for-profit, while of course NBBL is a for-profit entity run by a decisive and dynamic executive like you?
Mohit, it is only in forums like this that I'm reminded of that. So thanks for that. You might say, and rightly so, that NBBL was constituted as a for-profit organization. However, our DNA is exactly that of NPCI, right? Thankfully for me, there's neither regulatory pressure nor pressure from my board to show any profits. The only thing that we're supposed to deliver is a solid technology stack that works and is able to support billions of transactions that we intend to process in 3 years' time. With that, I also want to mention that we do not know future. We do not know how the future will shape up, and which is why possibly we wanted to keep the options open by constituting this organization as for-profit. However, my stated viewpoint, and this is what I've mentioned in multiple steering committees, is to have sustainable growth for my partners. And that is the only objective I'm working towards. Just to reiterate, people at times confuse BBPS with payment instruments or apps or try to compare it with PAs, but we are none of these. We're just an information exchange platform. We just pass on the information regarding a payment which is due and which has been made. Outside of that, our role is really limited, and therefore a lot of opportunity for the fintech partners, the startups, the PAs to come and innovate on the top of our very, very simple messaging system. I leave it at that.
Thanks, Noopur. Perfectly answered. Pranay, moving on to you. You had earlier spoken a bit about the fact that the RBI has expanded what the definition of bill payments is. So I just wanted to understand whether you feel there is a conflict of interest in what is defined as a bill versus what is defined as a payment transaction. In your head, how do you see that?
I don't see that as a conflict of interest. In fact, it is an opportunity by extending the role of BBPS, right? It's all part of the larger gamut of the digital payment ecosystem. So I definitely don't see that as a conflict. It is a definite opportunity for the BBPS ecosystem players. Now, I'll just add to what Noopur said, the sustainable economics, especially for the BBPS ecosystem players, is extremely important, right? Prior to BBPS, we had PAs, let's say, collecting, doing the collections on behalf of billers, right? Post BBPS, some of the PAs onboarded billers, some of the aggregators onboarded billers onto BBPS. The point I'm trying to make over here is when you onboard a biller or a new biller category, the commercials that you have outside of BBPS, I mean, obviously we are all making efforts to sustain that, but a lot of times billers leverage this opportunity to bring down their cost of collections, their cost of operations, right? There are, certain players who do suboptimal pricing, and because of that, the interchange that is available is minimal, and that puts pressure on the margins, right? So I think some of these things have to be kept in mind. Also, I believe that BBPS offers a significant opportunity to the billers, right? It offers omni-channel distribution, settlement guarantee, it is interoperable, anytime, anywhere payments, right? So overall, sustainable economics becomes an important part if we have to rapidly grow the system. And the opportunity, as I said, that lies in front of us with the regulator extending the scope of BBPS, I think is immense. So we need to, as a cohort, as a larger BBPS ecosystem, we need to work on sustainable economics, obviously with support from Noopur and her team.
Well, thanks so much for that. But let's hear the other side of the story. Ranjeet, from a payment aggregation space, do you actually agree with what Pranay just said?
So there have been commercial pressures on payment aggregators as far as BBPS is concerned. But I think over the past few years, Mohit, what we've seen is payment aggregators, the margins have been thinning. Some of them because of the regulations, some of them because of the immense competition that we face. I really see this as Pranay mentioned, as an opportunity, because we are an extension of how the bill first is generated, and therefore then a payment gateway or a payment aggregator can come in picture and complete that payment once we have fetched the bill. So I actually see this as an extension of, there's a clear synergy that I can see. Let's give them, the audience some perspective. So we have around 300 million households as far as the last census is concerned. Every household is making some bill payment or the other monthly. On an average, they are paying around 4. So more than half of our population is now on internet, an active internet user. Almost half of them, which is close to 340 million, use internet for a digital payment. So that's the universe that we are talking about. So I think BBPS, and I'm taking liberty in presence of Noopur to say that I think it is present in more than 650 cities or districts. And therefore, the scale is very, very large. What the PAs can now do, and along with BBPS, we can create a platform to only accept these 4 or 5 bills that are there. And I understand there is a concept of BC. So I think, a 20% of BBPS collection happens through business correspondent model, and that is primarily cash. But 60% of all BBPS collection is still in digital mode. And that itself tells a story that, if at all PAs and BBPS come together, I think it becomes a very, very strong platform.
Well, thanks so much for that. Just taking your last statement, which was the sheer width of distribution, which is 650 odd districts. Sheik, I'll ask you this question. Do you feel that bill payments and payment aggregation together can actually increase the width of financial inclusion in the country?
Definitely, right? So basically, if you see PAs and BBPS complement each other, right? And the other thing, if you see, is having multiple players will actually drive efficiency in the product, customer experience, right? Commercials, and the overall servicing life cycle, right? Fortunately, our market is a supply-led demand market, which means when you supply more, you get more demand, right? So it means there is place for multiple players to coexist, right? And definitely we PAs complement the BBPS business. Even at Worldline, if you see, apart from our core PG offering, we have services like subscription payments, cross-border payments, B2B CUG. Like that, BBPS is a platform which comfortably sits in the overall business strategy of ours. And in fact, we have a dedicated team for BBPS in Worldline, where we have a sales, product, and operations team working on this. So definitely they complement each other. And to give you a client perspective, merchant perspective, we have large utility billers who have integrated our PG as well as our BBPS integration. So which means we actually complement each other. That's my view.
Well, thanks so much for that. Noopur, please.
I'll just add on 2 points here, Mohit. One is that PAs, interestingly, on BBPS, play a role both on the demand and supply side. So on the supply side, they indeed bring on the utility players. On the supply side, they complete the payment transaction because the payment transaction is outside the purview of BBPS. So there's money to be made on either side of the BBPS play. The other thing I just wanted to highlight in lighter vein is that you would have noticed I do not talk numbers because I have enough and more cheerleaders tracking BBPS, growing BBPS, and indeed becoming amongst the top 3 players in BBPS. So just wanted to highlight that point.
No, thanks, Noopur. I'll actually follow up with the question, possibly on numbers there. As Pranay correctly said, right, BBPS hit 100 billion transactions in Jan, 111 in March, which is, in 2 months, such great scope. But what Ranjeet said earlier about payment aggregation space being a very low margin business. So do you feel that this scale will continue to grow? So even if the margins are thin, just the size of the market and the sheer numbers will mean that there is enough in it for all ecosystem players?
Where BBPS numbers are concerned, and you're talking about 2 months, we've grown 3 times over the last 2 years since our inception, right? And that is just the beginning. Our stated objective is to reach around 500 million transactions in the next 3 to 5 years. So to that extent, is there a room for growth? The answer is yes. The other is, despite the thinning margin, have we not seen other products in the country grow, thrive, survive, and enough and more interest getting generated? So yes, I'm very confident that we will continue to grow with maybe an accelerated speed over the next 5 years. At times, the ecosystem partners or the new partners may have to invest in this platform, and that investment will require monies to be put in. But over a long period of time, and with some of the developments that are happening as we speak, I am definitely sure that these entities, and if I would take some examples, there have been more than 3 entities which have only focused on BBPS, and they have valuations of hundreds of millions, right? We know who those entities are. There are many more such entities to be created if they pick their sides well, if they focus on investment, and if they choose to co-create with us. So that's where I rest my case. The numbers will happen, and we continuously see a lot more partners willing to work with us. Hopefully that will continue as well.
No, thanks so much for that, Noopur.
Can I
Pranay?
just add to what Noopur said? So I think our country is all about scale, transaction volumes, and the opportunity to innovate. Now, clearly understand, the margins might be thin, but then it's about the volumes that we get, right? I've spent 7 years in the payment industry, 7+ years. Prior to that, I was in the IT industry. So there, the justification always was, in the US markets, a product sells at, let's say, 30-40% discount on the list price. In India, it used to be 80-85%. Then the case was always around the volumes that India can deliver. Look at the telecom industry, right? Cheapest data anywhere in the world. And it's all about volumes. So I think this industry and BBPS is also all about volumes. And as the transaction volumes scale up, with the different use cases that BBPS is working upon, I guess, the money to be made or the entire quantum of money to be made for the different ecosystem players would also go up. So we are quite bullish, and it's just about scaling BBPS from where it is right now. And we are very confident about it.
No, thanks so much for that. Actually, I'll ask this question to you, Sheik. In India, we've already seen that the payment ecosystems which we have built are now, for want of a better word, being exported, whether in thought or even from a framework perspective. Do you think that what Worldline has seen in India can be actually taken to by Worldline elsewhere in the world? Specific reference to the payment aggregation space, but also bill payments.
Definitely, yes, right. So at least when it comes to digital payments, we as a country are 5 to 6 years ahead of rest of the world, right? And as some of you are aware, we recently partnered with UPI, NPCI to take UPI to European market, right? So definitely we can replicate these things, but the kind of scale that we are seeing here may not be relevant in other parts of the world. But yes, whatever we are doing here has to be replicated in other countries as well.
Well, thanks for that. Ranjit, if you just want to step in on that question and see, we've already got, say, 46% of the world's real-time payments are happening in India. Do you think merchants and consumers have become more demanding? Do you feel that in any part of your business?
So I think more than demanding, I will say this ecosystem is evolving, and we are finding newer ways to solve relevant payments problems. So the clear case now, the subject is BBPS, but let me take one step aside and talk about UPI. Now we are looking at UPI from a credit card happening, and which is already launched. Our company actually launched it for 3 of the banks that that we support in their payment journey. If we only couple or multiply the number of credit cards that we have, and people who are hooked onto UPI for their direct debit from their accounts, and they see the benefit of getting the credit for 40 days if they start doing the transactions from a credit card, numbers are immense. And therefore, this is more an evolved or kind of evolution that we are looking at in terms of the payment space. Having said this, on the BBPS, and I just want to touch upon what Pranay said, and he's bullish about it. I think there are certain discussion papers which are going on BBPS to be able to include tax payments, rent collection, education fee, etc., also coming in the fold of BBPS, which are some large value transactions. So up till now, what we have seen is these bill payments are to a certain ticket size that we have seen, largely on either electricity or DTH or FASTag. These are the 3 main segments that we are talking about. But these large segments coming in, the value of money also goes up in terms of the number of transactions that are going through with BBPS. Also, I've read somewhere that there are discussions which are happening where BBPS can be involved in a non-recurring kind of a payment as well, or a non-subscription based payment, which also opens a large, space for the entire ecosystem to evolve. So I think this is an evolving ecosystem.
Actually, just talking about what you spoke about on credit on UPI, and earlier what Pranay also spoke about, which was that NRIs can now make bill payments for their families here. It's very clear that the ecosystem which NPCI has provided is evolving beyond the base and actually coming into corner cases as well. So Noopur, do you feel that there are more pleasant surprises for the industry and more great developments like this which are planned?
Most definitely. And I think all of us would agree that we couldn't have asked for a more supportive regulator, a regulator who is forward-facing and has been very proactive in the decisions and the support that they are extending. So with that, I think we talked about use cases. Yes, in the December monetary policy, the governor announced BBPS scope to be beyond the recurring bill payment use cases. That is something that we are working on at this point of time. There will be a lot of work and surprises and news lined up in that area. Outside of that, the same settlement engine was found suitable for replicating for ONDC. So that is another thing that I wanted to highlight, that just matching of buyer and supplier is a problem to be solved over and over again. And with the entire ONDC efforts, we are powering their settlement and recon services as well. And outside of these two, the way we are extending beyond India, for example, I know of lots of family members in my age group whose parents are way back in Chandigarh, Delhi, Bangalore, etc. They want to be able to make the payments on behalf of their children. So these are some of the use cases that we are also enabling through our ecosystem. many other opportunities and use cases to be lined up. If I were to give you just one number and one opportunity, it is the entire B2B payment space, which on a monthly basis processes, upward of 400 million transactions. That itself lends itself beautifully to be brought onto BBPS, and we're working with multiple partners, some of which I think are in this room, to make BBPS available for B2B payments. Like I keep saying, the opportunity is immense. My job, however, is to ensure that we provide that platform for innovation, and we provide a platform that entire ecosystem can trust. With that, I'm sure the partners will take it forward.
No, thanks so much for that, Noopur, because I think you're spot on that. I think in India, we do a great job on B2C payments. We do a decent job on merchant-to-bank payments, which is the payment aggregation space. But B2B payments is something which is still in its infancy. Pranay, question for you. To what extent do you feel that it will be bill payments which will do it, or do you feel that it will be commercial cards on the PA side which will actually take off, or will it be both?
As Noopur said, I think the headroom for growth is as far as one's imagination can take you, in terms of the use cases, right? So the opportunity is very, very big. There are so many use cases that one can think of. Also look at the larger, the diversity the country has. Today, the country is still a 65% or near about cash economy. Cash to GDP ratio is 13%, right? So overall, I think the opportunity is very, very big. Everybody can coexist. The PAs, BBPS, ecosystem players all play a very complementary role. I think it's all about, in my opinion, success in an ecosystem, it does not depend on one entity. Everybody has to sort of participate. Everybody has to contribute and collaborate if we have to really scale this and increase the adoption of digital payments, grow bill payments. I think everybody has to collaborate and participate.
Oh, great. And actually, Ranjeet, the question for you, just following up on that, while we talk so much about fintechs and CIP payment aggregators or OUs, what do you see is the role of banks? Because at the end of the day, banks in India have the best distribution. They have already got the consumer base, and they are a lot more technologically adept than we give them credit for.
So see, our forward-looking regulator, and I keep saying that, I think we have the best, one of the best. They are now, I think, while they are giving a lot of promotion and space for the fintechs to come up, evolve, innovate, they're also, I think, the baseline is that they want the banks to manage the financial system and the fintechs to come up with the innovation, work with the banks, is what our understanding has been. Obviously, it's open for interpretation. But therefore, like you said, because of the scale and the reach of banks and the majority of customers still sitting with the bank, despite so many fintechs claiming that we have so much of market share, etc., in terms of the customer space, banks will always remain relevant, important. How well the journey can be tread between a bank and a fintech is something which will pave way of a much better customer satisfaction, if at all we can say that. Over the past few years, especially during the COVID times, we've seen banks evolving and getting into partnerships of some of the very innovative fintechs and find ways to be able to solve the problems that the customer is facing as far as digital payments is concerned. So I don't think bank is going anywhere. I think they will remain the pillar.
Yeah. Just to add a couple of points on that. It's an interesting question when you talk about banks, right? So banks in this overall ecosystem plays a dual role, right? One side, they compete with us. On the other side, they are the acquirers and issuers, right? But the change that we are seeing, at least with the top 4 banks in the country in the recent past, is they've become very aggressive, right? And they are innovating equal to a fintech. And the best part is they are not doing it in-house. They are partnering with a lot of companies, startups, and then coming up with a lot of innovation. So this is also a very, very important step for fintechs to grow and get into the next level of growth. Like regulators support, we also need the banks to become more proactive and innovating and technically driven. That will actually help us, fintechs and paytechs, to grow further.
No, thanks so much for that. We are doing well on time, but I do want to give everybody a chance to ask questions before we'll sort of do a wrap-up with our panelists. So if you can have the lights on, and then we can just go around with questions. Folks, we have a great group here, so feel free to ask them all the tough questions which I didn't. We need to get a mic over there, please.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Raj Prasad. I am from Utkarsh Small Finance Bank. Since there was a mention about the role of banks, right? And so I believe when a payment is coming to a biller is from a bank account in some manner, and when it is going to a biller, it is again into a bank account, correct? So, and Sheik also mentioned that there is banks becoming more aggressive in this space. So my question to all of you is that, will it remain a fee play, or it will become a float play like any payments and cash management over a period of time it has evolved? Because we see a lot of, obviously the banks will have an advantage in terms of, because the float will be sitting in the bank, and the, the tech partners will be more on the fee play. So how do you see the future in this regard?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. He's planning to bring down margins in this business even more, but I'll throw the question to the panel.
So I think both will coexist. Why do we have to decide whether one will be there and another will go away? So while the margins thinning is one of the problems that I think most of the fintech players are looking at. However, like you rightly said, since the entire money sits with the bank, they are anyway benefiting from both the sides. But having said this, if the bank is willing to be able to pass that for some of the innovative partners, I think it will make more sense. And like I said, it will coexist. It will have to coexist.
Great. Next question, please.
Yeah, hi.
A gentleman over there in the middle.
Yeah. This is Rahul from Daulat Capital.
Sorry, can't. Oh,
yeah.
there. Okay, good.
Yeah. So to Nipur's remark where she was saying that she's working on the sustainability.
You'll have to be slightly louder. We can't hear you over here.
Yeah. Is it any better?
Better.
Yeah. So to the Nipur's remark where she was saying that she's working on the sustainability of the partners. Just wanted to understand, given that I think my understanding is that there is very small flat commission per transaction, and the scalability has already reached to a respectable level already. I'm sure it can go much more. So what is the business model or sustainability scope for people who are only on this path? Because some of these players are doing so many things, and this is one of it. But do you think it is commercial enough for somebody to be just partnering from a BBPS perspective?
So Noopur, the question was that already at this point, it's again a commercial question, that margins are thin, as in the commissions are thin. And while we are at scale already, do you feel that this can increase, or will it stay this way in the future as well?
So let me not comment on margins directly. And I think Pranay, during the panel, he spoke about the fact that when the volumes grow, even the small margins start becoming significant. So that is one thought I want to leave with you. However, my strong belief is that people want to give money if they see value. So the ecosystem's job is really to create value for both the customers as well as the billers or merchants, whatever you choose to call them. If there's value to be created, then there's money to be made. It may not happen directly, but there's been multiple research papers that confirm that indirectly the PA businesses or the banks or fintechs or startups, everyone do end up making money if they come out with an innovation. So with volumes and talking about volumes, we talked about 300 million households, each processing 3 bills each. That itself is a 1 billion transaction opportunity. We are nowhere close at 100 million right now. So there's opportunity of volume growth there. With that, the limited margin also becomes significant. Also, please remember that in terms of valuation, if there's a predictable transaction that is happening on a platform, the valuation is much higher. And that is the only reason why a lot of startups that are facing customers join in onto BBPS, because with BBPS, they get use cases which are monthly recurring. And that, therefore, binds the customer to stay with that platform, to stay with that account over and over again, right? So there's a stickiness component which equals valuation and therefore money. There's a volume component that is equivalent to significant money to be made. And there's a third component, which is the merchant or the customer parting that extra money because you have created value for a specific need that they're facing. So with that, I think sustainability would not be a challenge as far as BBPS is concerned.
I also want to add a couple of points from a PA perspective, right? How do we make this more profitable or increase the margin? As Noopur said, I'm not going to get into the margin game. Of course, we all know there is volume. But one hack here is, instead of you being just a BOU, even if you can become a COU, right? If you are both BOU and COU, then you make, there are some benefits on the interchange because always honest transactions are more than the offers transactions. Even if you see the top 5 players of BBPS from PAs, including Mohit's company, they're all BOU and COU. So that's one thing that you can look at it.
I'll also just summarize what Noopur said and add to it. One is it's all about volumes. It's about innovation. And as I said, BBPS definitely offers a very strong proposition to the billers, which I spoke about. One more, when we talk about innovation, Noopur discussed about co-creation. So, for example, we've launched the UPMS, right, Unified Present Management System, whereby standing instruction could be given, so a bill could be fetched and ordered and debit could happen. Now, see, these are the value adds that you're creating. Now, if a customer or a biller sees the value add, then obviously they are willing to part with the money. So we'll, as an ecosystem, we'll have to keep on innovating. We'll have to keep on providing value adds so that the larger ecosystem becomes profitable and there are sustainable economics.
Okay, thanks so much for that.
Yeah, I'm Pankaj Mehta from Kotak Bank. We spoke about growth, sustainability, but do you feel and what we are doing in terms of resiliency, in terms of entire ecosystem, in terms of if there is a cyber war once in a while, are we ready for that? And what are we doing in that space?
I have this session in the second half, shameless plug, which is on fraud and financial inclusion. Please attend that. But I'll throw the question back to the panel.
Mohit, instead of us, why don't you answer a couple of questions from audience?
No, I think I won't answer that, but I'll just say that what the regulator has built has been a framework, and that framework is not purely about transaction processing. It's actually about exactly what you mentioned, security. And one of the reasons why the payment aggregation space is getting regulated as well is to ensure that fraud goes down, customer satisfaction increases, and systems are resilient. So I believe that is the actual direction rather than anything else.
Also, I'll just add to this, curbing, let's say, frauds attributed to merchants is very important, from a payment aggregation perspective, or even from a BBPS perspective, right? And that will help improve customer satisfaction as well. Now, obviously, as PAs, you do the risk assessment and checks and full KYC at the time of onboarding, but now with the account aggregator framework available, if that can be leveraged, because the FIPs would provide a lot of rich data, right, to assess the sort of risk a merchant poses. Or from a BBPS perspective, COUs onboard agent institutions. So again, if the risk checks, risk assessments could take, leverage the account aggregator framework, I think that will help bring down frauds. And also consistent education around frauds is very important so that at the end of the day, the episodes and the number of frauds go down and we have satisfied customers.
Well, thanks for that. More questions? We'll have time for please. Gentleman over there.
Hello, this is Siddesh from Bajaj Electricals. So I have a question on UPI integration with credit cards. So we have started with RuPay. So is there any plan for Visa and MasterCard? So basically, is there any restriction from government or what?
So currently it is applicable with RuPay, but there have been discussion papers on Visa and MasterCard. So we will all see a roadmap for Visa and MasterCard also coming in the fold. In fact, other players as well. But currently it is for RuPay.
Yeah. And if that is happening, any future for the physical cards, because then they no longer have any value in say, because who would carry a physical card if I can on the go pay via apps?
Yeah, so again, the question is whether, you would want to trade off one mode of payment to another. I think both will coexist. How much can a physical card grow is something, we can all question. But the way people have, there is a UPI story that India has, and if credit card on UPI also looks towards that story, and obviously, the usage of a credit card on an online mode without having a physical card becomes much bigger. But I would still say they will, both coexist. How much can a physical card grow is something that we'll have to see in future.
A little small extension. Even GPay allows an HSBC card, which is a Visa card, to be attached to that.
That's too technical. Let's meet outside and have this discussion.
Oh, sure.
Next question, please.
Yeah. Hi, I am Arif from Elements. So my question is to Mr. Ranjeet. So I wanted to know, you talked about collections being a big space, right? And there are multiple problems in the existing collections ecosystem, like there are drop-offs, there are issues of insufficient balance. So what do you think is the next big thing in collections, and how can these problems which are there in the current ecosystem be solved, right? If you can answer this.
So the answer is innovation, right? Everybody is doing this. So as a payment aggregator, what we are doing, and I can probably try for you to relate to what we are doing and how this can solve the collection problem is. You see, till some time back, the integration to a merchant for a payment gateway used to take 4 or 5 days. Now there are payment buttons, which is like a low code or a zero code kind of a integration, which enables the merchant to start collecting payment instantly without having an integration made. There are multiple, settlement modes now, which essentially means that a merchant can get the settlement either on the same day or a near real time or an instant payment or an on-demand payment. So a merchant can ask for the settlement on a specified time. Now, these are just a part of what kind of innovation which is happening in the payments domain, which will eventually lead to the, to answer your question, a better collection for the entire ecosystem, not only for the merchant, but the entire ecosystem. This is what we are looking at as the India payment story is evolving and growing big. We will find better ways to be able to collect this.
Yeah, just to add on to those points, the two opportunities on collection side, one duly covered is the entire innovation piece. The other is really making it digitally enabled for the bottom of the pyramid. There, people are still struggling for repaying their EMIs, irrespective of where they've got that EMI from, or repaying even the money lender. So just easing up the bottom of the pyramid for collections is one opportunity. Of course, innovation is a second opportunity. And therefore, what is next in collections, if I can use one word, that would be BBPS, because we are attempting to democratize and make it available, irrespective of the shape and size of the entity or the individual. So that is the next frontier. Watch out.
Noopur, I have another question for you. So, hi. You also talked about BBPS for B2B payments, right? So what are the plans and like, is there any timelines that you are looking forward to for enabling BBPS for B2B bill payments?
We've already started certain pilots, so if you're interested, I'll be happy to share some of the knowledge from those pilots with you. Having said which, there is there's a lot of technology work that we need to do outside of the stack we already have, and that is work in progress at this point of time. We're looking at 2 more quarters before we can launch it in the system.
Thank you.
Great. I think we are slightly out of time, so I will just very, very quickly wrap up. I think we had a great discussion. You were a great audience, and we had some great panelists. We got started by understanding what BBPS is, what the payment aggregation space is. We looked at some of the differences, but actually quickly came to an understanding that there's a lot more synergies than otherwise thought of. We also spoke about commercials, and I think Noopur answered it perfectly by saying, as long as you provide value, you will be able to get something in return for that. And I think it's very clear that the market is scalable, scale is out there. Raj's question was also talking about float. You can monetize things in different ways, and I think that's there. We have built a framework in India, both in bill payments and in payment aggregation, and I think this is just going to keep us all working and busy for the next decade or so. And thanks so much, and thank you for being such a great panel. Thank you for being such a great audience. And a round of applause, please, for the panel.
Thanks, Mohit. Thanks, everybody.